Hi everyone, this is Andy from We Are Wellbeing. Just wanted to welcome you all to episode 1 of our new Wellbeing Insights series. Obviously we've put these together to support employees and organisations to get through this current coronavirus situation. A lot of us are working in the lockdown, and we just thought that putting these 12 individual webinars together would help some people out. And that's the whole intention. To keep everybody engaged and to keep everybody connected to the different webinars that we're running, we've put together a hashtag, so hashtag WAW Insights. So if you want to follow that on social media, tweet about anything interesting that you've heard, and then we can collate it all at the end and put it all together for you. So today I'm joined with my colleague Sue Jones. Hi Sue.
Hi Andy.
So Sue's our Director of Wellbeing. So Sue is our expert from a sort of medical profession, and I wanted to give you a bit of an insight into what it looks like to set up a wellbeing program for within an organisation, just to give you a little bit of an insight into what wellbeing at work looks like and how some organisations do it well, some miss the boat or kind of miss the mark a little bit. So if you are going to run a wellbeing insights initiative, some of the tips in here will hopefully get you off to a good start. And this is from an organisational point of view, these are some things that we can help with. So starting off with sort of Wellbeing Insights series, we're delivering 12 individual webinars over the next 4 weeks. So there's going to be one every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. This is obviously episode 1. So all of you that are tuning in, thank you for joining us. This particular one is aimed more so at organisations as opposed to employees, but hopefully this will be something that you find interesting. So to start off, looking at what we aim to do as an organisation, it really is creating a place where people thrive. And for us, Sue, I'm sure Sue, you'll agree that it's very much about a holistic approach to wellbeing.
Yeah, absolutely. So historically, wellbeing's kind of just looked at the health side of things. So how someone's they are in their general physical health. But in recent times, there's been a lot more awareness on that mental side of stuff and how that's started to impact on employee happiness. Because engagement that's measured within an organisation, you could be really engaged but have something terrible go on in your life and you're not particularly happy, but that would have an impact on the scores that you would achieve within your engagement. So it's much more emphasis at the moment around looking at that happiness strand and how that impacts on well-being and in turn organisational performance.
Absolutely. So when we talk about well-being, the word well-being gets bandied around quite a lot, and it's not, the context of it doesn't really get interpreted correctly quite often within organisations. So for us, well-being, we take a real simplistic approach. Well-being is quite often defined as a person's health and a person's happiness. Now, health itself is really measurable. So Sue and I, coming from a sort of like a medical and health screening background, we could take your heart rate, your blood pressure, run an exercise ECG. We could run all these different weird and wonderful tests, and we could give you a cardiovascular risk score of how likely it is you'll have a heart attack within the next 5 years. So we know that health is really, really measurable. But how measurable is the person's happiness? It's a lot harder to gauge. It's a lot harder to measure. I could ask Sue today, Sue, how happy are you? And she could give me, you could give me a score out of 1 to 5. But that's you, depending on whether you're being truthful, whether you want me to get the answer that you want me to see. And because happiness isn't as measurable, it's not classified as being peer reviewed. And what that means is it's not approved by academics, and because it's not peer reviewed, it doesn't end up in any organisational or public policy. Almost none of the organisations that we encounter initially have anything in their policy to say that we endeavour to keep our people this happy this amount of the time. But what you've got to question is, how important is happiness? So, Sue, have you seen sort of how this has been implemented within organisations?
Yeah, a little bit. Some organisations, they like to ask, their employees on a day-to-day basis, how happy are they today, and see how that correlates with their well-being. But that's something that, although there's some really good data around, only a few organisations are starting to do that and capture that data. But you'll probably see that there's going to be a much stronger correlation between happiness and performance than there is with general health and performance. Some people could be on the brink of a heart attack but still be performing really well in their work, and it's not until an event happens that then there's a dip in their performance because they're not working for the next 6 or 8 weeks. Whereas happiness has that much stronger correlation, whereas you're feeling much more happy in yourself, you're much more engaged in your work, and you're going to perform better and deliver more. Whereas health, is a little bit more arbitrary in terms of the correlation there.
And I think that there's something to be said between when we talk about health and happiness. We talk about, people can be healthy but not enjoy what they're doing. And I think from a performance point of view, obviously, well-being, it is the majority of what we do is about supporting individuals to become healthier and happier. But ultimately, this is workplace well-being. And business, we can't forget that business is at the root of what we're doing. So we do want people to perform well. We do want productivity to be high. We do want lower absenteeism. We do want lower presenteeism. We want all these things to stay down. And I think the key to that is this happiness element. And the other thing that plays a part of that is what we call a discretionary effort. So there's a reason that me and Sue work quite often on a Sunday morning, and we do the stuff that we don't do necessarily within the 9 to 5. It's because we love what we do, and when somebody loves what they do and they love their organisation, they're more likely to be happy, and they're more likely to provide that discretionary effort. Now, to kind of move on, one of the things that you do need to be aware of are what we call the 4 pillars of well-being, and these vary from organisation to organisation. So some other organisations might have a slightly different 4 pillars, but the 4 pillars that we work with and we engage with really are physical health. So Sue, do you want to elaborate a little bit on physical health?
Yeah, sure. So physical health could be anything that affects your body physically. So it could be your cardiac health, it could be musculoskeletal, it could be blood pressure, it could be anything that's going to impact on your physical health. So anything that we would measure in a one-to-one health assessment could be HbA1c for your risk of diabetes or anything like that.
And then we've got the mental health. So mental health, obviously, is a huge subject, and we could spend you could train on mental health for years and years and years and only scratch the surface. It's a beast of a subject. But in reality, when we talk about mental health at work, we talk about the difference between neurotic mental health and psychotic mental ill health. So when we talk about neurotic, we're talking about extreme versions of normal emotions. So we may be talking about stress, anxiety, depression, the common things that we like to see within an organisation, but also then the expectation within an organisation. So say, for instance, if you're a line manager within an organisation, what does the organisation truly expect you to be able to do about somebody struggling with depression or anxiety or chronic stress? So it's being able to identify what are the signs and symptoms, how can we offer some level of support, but really outlining what should managers not be doing as well. Because one of the things that we see is when we have a manager or somebody within an organisation that has a high level of empathy, quite often they'll go above and beyond what they need to be doing, what they should be doing, and end up putting themselves at risk. So it's sort of like a two-sided coin. We need to make sure that managers do as much as they can, but without putting themselves at risk as well. And then just general mental health awareness is something that's fundamental for an organisation, especially going through, the last 10 years we've seen it massively increase. But awareness around mental health is fundamental to a wellbeing programme. And then we've got social wellbeing. Sue, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So social wellbeing is something that is really important, but often, again, unnoticed within an organisation. So as humans, we're social creatures. So we like to be able to bounce ideas off of each other. We like to be able to know that each other are okay. And fundamentally, we like to typically work within teams. So having that social component to a workplace is really important for somebody's well-being and how connected they feel with their organisation. And then in turn, again, how well they perform. So again, it's correlated to their performance. So not just is it really important for the individual's well-being, for how they feel at work, but it also affects the organisation as well really strongly. So having those socials, having those team working days, they really are shown to have a really strong effect on performance and engagement within organisations.
Thank you. And then we move on to financial well-being. Now, financial well-being, it might seem a bit odd that it sits there, that financial is actually one of the 4 pillars, but because of the huge amount of stress derived from financial worry and financial instability, it absolutely has to be one of the founding pillars of well-being. So for us as an organisation, like Sue and I, we're both, Sue's a medical expert, and myself, I come from a physiology background, and we're both trained in supporting mental health. So financial well-being is absolutely one of the areas as an organisation we needed additional support. So we've partnered with an organisation called SK Berry Associates. And all of our support comes from them, and they're absolutely fantastic organisation. So one of I think it's episode 11, is on financial wellbeing. So if you want to hear more about that, you can tune in then. So let's move forward then onto wellbeing responsibility. So when organisations invest in a wellbeing programme, it's really important that they identify what is the expectation of different levels within the business. So what I mean by that is, first of all, we've got the organisation. So we need to identify what are the responsibilities of the organisation to implement wellbeing. And this might look at things like, is there a policy in place? You'd be really surprised how many organisations do not have they'll have a health and safety policy, but they won't have a mental health policy or a health and wellbeing policy. So having something like that as a baseline strategy. Then facilitating wellbeing, putting on training courses, making sure that health and wellbeing can happen within the business. Whether that's having some sort of budget, whether it's some sort of insight, but it has to start from the top. One of the things that we see commonly within organisations is when they expect managers to deliver wellbeing, and lots of line managers go on training courses for wellbeing, but beyond. So when you ask those line managers who looks after your wellbeing, nobody puts their hands up. Nobody sort of has any sort of insight into who's supposed to be looking after them. So it absolutely has to start with the top. So if you're a CEO, if you're an MD, if you're a director within the business, this is your responsibility. You have to be buying into it. In episode 2, we're talking to one of our associates, Phil Marsland, and he's talking about leading wellbeing. So this is going to be a key one for you to. Episode 3, that one is on leading wellbeing. So that's one for you to tune into. So then we've got managers. So Sue, do you want to talk a little bit about what managers should be doing within a business?
Yeah, sure. So manager role really is to kind of bring to life that duty of care that the organisation has. So their role is to have that two-way communication with their employees, to implement regular one-to-ones with their staff, to spot signs and symptoms. If their employee just doesn't seem right in themselves, it's to, ask those probing questions around, how they are in themselves and things like that. And really a kind of support mechanism that's there in place from both an organisational perspective and an individual perspective. So really important to have that. Another layer going beyond that is something that we recommend, is the layer of a kind of wellbeing champion. So that's really about having this additional person that may not be your line manager, could be anyone within the organisation, that's a go-to person that you can speak to about your wellbeing. So this really brings to life a wellbeing strategy and starts to incorporate it into the culture of the organisation. So really important, rather than just a tick box exercise of having a training session, this really helps it to bring wellbeing to life within your organisation so that you can go to that person. And their role, although not a formal role, is a very kind of informal support mechanism, someone that you can go to, speak to in confidence around how you're feeling, that can support you at that time, so people can be identified as these wellbeing champions. Andy, do you want to say any more about that?
Yeah. So I mean, champions first came around, a few years ago, because we were going into organisations and we were finding that wellbeing was just getting dumped on HR. And HR, surprisingly, we're already busy. So it was one of those things. It was getting dumped on HR, and you had this already busy team trying to organise a whole wellbeing project for a whole organisation, and it wasn't any surprise that a lot of organisations were struggling to get things off the ground. So we started thinking about, what could we do to support organisations to really thrive and make sure that well-being didn't just happen when we turned up. Obviously, it's great for us as an organisation for engagement to go up when we're there, and that's fantastic. But what we've also got to make sure is that it carries on happening. And the way it carries on happening is when we leave, when the trainers and the providers walk away from the business, that wellbeing still happens. Now, for that to keep happening, what we need is this team of volunteers, and usually they're all employees within the business at different levels within the business, who will then go on a one-day training course and then receive additional supervision, maybe some top-up days as well, and a little bit of coaching and insight from us to keep the well-being the well-being message alive, if you like, and that's proven to be a really successful layer in this layer of responsibility. Then finally, what we look at is the actual responsibility of an individual employee. So as a human, as an adult, what is your responsibility? Now, part of that is looking after your own manageable health. So for me, as a responsible human being adult, I'm responsible for going to bed on time. I'm responsible for putting the right food in my body to make sure that my energy levels are what they should be to be able to go and do a good day's work. So, I would absolutely love to stay up on a night binge watching Netflix and eating chocolate biscuits every night. But there's a reason I don't do that. Because if I do it, it'll impact on the way I feel the next day. I'll be less likely to exercise. I'll be more likely to eat rubbish food continuously. It's this whole cycle. So one of the things that's crucial for employees to realise is what is your responsibility. And it's not being big brother about it, telling them what they have to do. It's giving people that insight. Then the other thing that I think is really crucial, well, two things. One is this thing called sort of like feeding back. Now, it's really important that employees feel like they can turn to a manager and say, do you know what, I'm struggling, without being told or being seen to be underperforming or being weak. People shouldn't be victimised for struggling or developing the adverse reactions to stress. So being able to push back a little bit and say, actually, it is getting too much, should be something employees can do. And then the other thing that employees is really, really valuable is being what we call a compassionate colleague. We talked about this with a lot of organisations. One organisation that we've done a lot of work with is a national charity, and a huge element of their well-being at work was based around the support they get from their colleagues. So I think there's definitely something in there about being a compassionate colleague and really supporting other team members without it just being a manager's or a champion's responsibility, helping each other because, human nature and all that. So then one of the things that we do need to consider when we're thinking about buying into a wellbeing program is what are the right questions to ask. And without doubt, the first thing that we need to consider, the first question we need to ask ourselves around the investment in a wellbeing program is why? Why are you doing it? Is there a particular reason? Is there something that's sparked? Is there something that's happened within the organisation? Is it the culture that doesn't feel right? Are people underperforming? Is there, there's got to be some sort of insight into why you're doing it. If you can't understand the why, I guarantee you'll waste a load of money and time and effort on putting in a wellbeing initiative that is doomed to fail. So the first thing you've got to consider is why. Are you just doing it? Are you just investing in wellbeing because a load of other organisations are doing it and it seems like the thing to do? And I'd say that's not a very good why. So really what you've got to do is find out a bit more about your business, a bit more about your people, and understand the why. And then once you've got the why, obviously then you've got to consider the budget. Now, there's this misconception that you need a huge budget for a wellbeing program. I'm telling you now, you can run, and I probably shouldn't tell you this because I run a wellbeing company, but you can run a wellbeing program on no budget. Now that might sound like a silly thing for somebody in my position to say, but it absolutely can be done. But what we do as an organisation is show you how to implement the free stuff, how to implement the stuff that's really going to have an impact. And then if you do have some budget, where you should spend it to make the most value and what will have the biggest impact on the budget that you do have. Sue, have you seen organisations that have implemented a budget and not done it in the best way?
Yeah, all the time. You go into an organisation and you'll say, or we've put these signs on the back of the toilet doors, or we've put, free fruit at reception or something like that, and you're thinking, well, that's great, but what need is this addressing? How is this going to affect somebody's mental well-being or their physical well-being, or what are the real differences that's going to make? And is that a need within the organisation? For some organisations there's different challenges. For some, sleep would be much more important than diet, for instance. So are they meeting the need that's there, and are they spending their money in the right ways to make the biggest impact? So it's really about optimising your spend on and achieving those results.
Yeah, I think a lot of organisations are good. I mean, we call it, an old fitness instructor term was the smoke and mirrors effect, where you've got this all singing, all dancing, this thing that looks fantastic, but is absolutely a waste of time. For me, a classic example is the amount of times I've gone into organisations for a wellbeing fair, and they've hired one of these exercise bikes with a smoothie maker attached to it, so employees can jump on the bike, pedal and power the run blended smoothie. Now, that might be a good bit of engagement, but ultimately, what impact does that have? I mean, if I've got a manager that doesn't get me, if I'm struggling with stress outside of work, if I'm got the early signs of depression, what on earth is getting on an exercise bike and blending my own smoothie going to do? Absolutely, So it's really these really trivial things. So what we're really passionate about is making sure that you get the right culture. If you're not, it's not about creating a culture, because obviously culture already exists within a business, but it's about shaping that culture and making it feel like a place where, do you know what? If you've got best way I'd explain it is, if you've got an employee that's leaving the business, that they would leave and still review your organisation highly. A good, if everybody was a good leaver, and it's about keeping the best people, retaining the best people, and hiring the best people. If you can do that within an organisation, you're absolutely onto a winner. So budget, don't worry if your budget is low or if it's non-existent. There are still things that you can do. And then if you do have budget, it's about where's the most effective place to spend it. So then what we talk about is, and to understand that then, is part of this understanding the employee needs. So there's two things you've got to consider. Side by side is, what are the needs of the employees? That's fundamental. But also, what are the needs of the business? And it can't just be give. We're going to do all this stuff for employees, because ultimately, we've got to remember that there is a business that the reason why we're here, the reason why we're going to that particular building or that office or that space is because it is a business, and the business needs to thrive. And when the two are met, and when the employee needs and the business needs coincide and they marry up together, that's when businesses start to become more successful and they start to thrive in this, especially in this economy. So it's making sure all of those questions are answered. So what is the why? Do you have a budget? If you do have a budget, where's the best place to spend it? What are the needs of the business, but also what are the needs of the employees? So then what we're going to move on to is this understanding of strategic intervention. So we classify three main areas of wellbeing implementation. So we've got primary, we've got secondary, and we've got tertiary interventions. So primary interventions would be looking at things like, is there a policy in place? The primary interventions are things that the employees might not notice happening. So they might not notice, there's a new policy that's popped up. But these are the things these are like the grassroots, the lowest tier on the Maslow hierarchy. These are the things that need to be implemented for this to work. Then you've got the secondary interventions. So the secondary interventions might be addressing things like coaching needs, might be addressing training needs of say managers, or like Sue mentioned earlier about the Wellbeing Champions training, something like that. They're the areas that will support the secondary intervention. And then finally we've got the tertiary. So these are the areas of wellbeing that the employees will really notice, that will improve the employee experience. Things like your free fruit, things like your yoga sessions, all the additional add-ons. Where we see organizational well-being go wrong is where organizations invest there first and think that that's the thing that needs to happen. So we do go into organizations, we do work with organizations that initially have put out the free fruit and they've put out the boot camp on a Thursday night, and they put all these different things together. But ultimately, what will happen is you'll engage with a small number of people within a business, and a lot of the other people within the business won't have any sort of interaction with it. So that's sort of like the smoke and mirrors area. It does have its place, and it is important to have those interventions, but you've got to get primary and secondary in there first. So that's from an organisational point of view, and a strategic intervention side of things. That's where we need to start. So if anybody kind of wants some insight into what their organisation should be doing, this is where we're to help, not just with the tertiary. And then from a kind of understanding of what well-being looks like as an investment, there's certain things that you need to consider. So one of those things is, can we see some measurable improvements? So as far as health measures, obviously, like Sue and I, we can come in and do, and our team, we can do things like health checks, where we can actually say, well, your blood pressure was this, and now it's this. So we've seen a measurable improvement. We can, there's lots of different diagnostics and measures that we can use, but it's there's the other measures as well. So things like from a HR point of view, what's happened to absenteeism? Have we seen an increase in presenteeism? When we look at the stats from the CIPD, so in the last sort of 2020 stats, we saw that absenteeism had actually gone down within organisations on the whole, but we'd seen an increase in presenteeism, so people coming to work ill, and an increase in leavism. People using their annual leave to recover. So what does that say about organisations? I mean, so to me, that tells me that people are scared about taking time off. And these are the things that we've got to really look at. So there's obviously the physical metrics, but also some of the data that we need to measure as well. Then we've got the ROI. Now, what we know is that for every £1 spent on well-being, that there is up to a £9 return on investment. So it is a safe investment. Is looking at the investment in well-being. Sue, do you want to elaborate a little bit on sort of our bespoke programs that we can run?
Yeah, sure. So really, we can tailor training that you need within an organisation to your needs. So although we've got a number of kind of off-the-shelf training programs that we can use, we can really tailor those to your requirements. We can also, implement certain, one-to-one health checks, or we can start to make differences to your employees' health, where they may not have the time to or be able to get an appointment at things like the doctors. We can do some pathology testing. So we work with a medical lab that can do blood test analysis to find out, what are those root causes really going on within their body, and what kind of changes can they make, whether that be within their diet or from a medication point of view, that can start to improve some of those metrics in turn as well. So there's a whole host of areas that we can do, and some interventions as well. So as an organisation, we also do vitamin B12 injections, which can be really great for somebody's mental performance, and also from a mental health point of view as well. So sometimes it can just be a biochemical response to the body that's going on with the body, and you could go on hundreds of mindfulness courses or things like that, but if something isn't right intrinsically within the balance within your body, you're not going to be able to make those red blood cells to carry that oxygen around. So without that, there's going to be a problem. So we help to look at what is that root cause, whether that be something culturally within the organisation, or whether that be something individually within somebody's body that's causing the problem. So there's a whole range of things that we can do, and using that data, we can then create bespoke interventions to help your specific organisation.
Brilliant. And then from a productivity stance, obviously from a business requirement, that is the ultimate aim. If your people are there, they're working harder, people are working more efficiently, but that's not driven by sort of like slave labour intervention. It's driven by the fact that they're happier, and when people are happier, they're more engaged. They get more done. They're more focused. So things like mindfulness training, it might seem a bit trivial, but actually, when you think about it, if someone's more mindful, they're more focused, they're sharper. These are the things that really have an impact on the way that people feel. And then finally, just to kind of finish this slide off, is as a business, we pride ourselves on working solely with experts. So as an organisation, as well-being being such a huge subject, it's like I said, this beast of a subject covering sort of all four pillars. I've never met anybody, and I've been working in wellbeing since I'm 35 now, and I've been working in health and wellbeing since I was 17. I've never met anybody that is an expert in all four pillars. It's too big a subject to be an expert in all of those four pillars. So what we pride ourselves on is working with experts. So we've got nutrition experts, we've got psychological experts, we've got sort of physiological health experts. We've partnered with financial wellbeing experts. So these are I think this is a really crucial area to highlight, because we see all the time there are so many people working in health and wellbeing that I'd classify as moonlighters. Unfortunately, health and wellbeing in this industry is not very well regulated. So it's fundamental. One of the things that you've got to do as an organisation is check on the legitimacy of the people that are delivering for you. It's scarily surprising how many people have just decided that they want to be a wellbeing trainer and a wellbeing coach. So I think one of the things that you've got to do from a training perspective is do some background checks. Make sure that the people that are speaking in front of your employees, your workforce, they have the credentials, they've got the qualifications, they've got the training, the expertise, the background to be able to back up what they're proposing to speak about. So that's something for you guys to be mindful of. So just in summary then, wellbeing is all about health and happiness, and I think the two need to be taken as seriously as each other. Remember that happiness isn't as measurable, but how are you going to implement those interventions? There's the four pillars of wellbeing, so physical health, psychological wellbeing, social wellbeing, and financial. You've got to consider the responsibility. So who is responsible for wellbeing at what level within your organisation? So you've got the organisation, you've got line managers, potentially wellbeing champions, and then what are the expectations and the responsibilities of an employee? What are the questions you're going to ask yourself? So, what is the why? Why are you investing in wellbeing? Why are you listening to this webinar? Do you just want to hear my voice? Or did you actually, are you actually interested in finding something interesting about wellbeing and getting it off to the right start? As far as the needs, what are the business needs and what are the employee needs? Does the wellbeing investment and does the wellbeing strategy support both? And that's one thing that you've got to be sort of crucial of. And then as far as the strategy goes, what does your wellbeing strategies look like? As a business, your strategy, it cannot be copy and pasted from another organisation's strategy. What works for this organisation won't work for the next organisation. So it's fundamental for you to really consider what's that going to look like. Obviously, as a business, that's what we do. So first off, Sue, thank you for joining me for the first.
Thank you, Andy.
For the first session. It's so this was obviously episode 1. We will be delivering episode 2 this coming Wednesday. So that is with Sue and Dr. Emma on mental health. And then on Friday I'll be joined by Phil Marsland to talk about leading wellbeing. So thank you for joining us. Don't forget that we've got the hashtag WAW Insights. So if you want to follow that on social, please share this as much as you can. Let us know what your feedback is, what you think, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.